My name is Tom Walker, and on Christmas Eve I ended up on the floor in front of my entire family, gravy on my shirt and my hips burning, because my stepson Kyle pushed me away from the head of the table and said, "That seat belongs to my dad. Get out." For a moment, no one moved. The Christmas lights blinked in the window. Forks hovered midair. I looked up at Kyle's thin half smile and waited for my wife, Linda, to say my name in a way that showed it mattered. She didn't. She grabbed napkins and started blotting gravy from the hardwood, as if the spill was the real issue, not the man on the floor. That was when something inside me shut down. Not anger, but something colder and more settled. Cedar Rapids, Iowa is home to me. Snowy driveways, small talk at the credit union, Friday fish fries at the VFW. I'm 56, and I've always lived by simple rules. Show up, keep your word, pay your bills early. At this stage of life, your name is your credit. That's why the chair mattered. It was my father's chair, with worn wooden arms and a squeak in the back left leg. When he was in hospice, he sat in it by the window, watching the parking lot like he was waiting for someone to come back. After he passed, I took it into my garage, tightened the joints, stained it walnut, and reupholstered the seat. I did it myself because it felt like saving part of him. When Linda and I married, our second marriage for both of us, I brought that chair into her split-level house like it belonged. For years on holidays, it sat at the head of the table, not because I demanded it, but because that's where the host sits. That's how I was raised, and I had been hosting more than anyone cared to admit. 2 summers ago, I used a large part of my savings to redo Linda's kitchen. Solid cabinets, a new faucet, better lighting over the sink. Nothing flashy, just functional and decent. Linda cried when she saw it and said, "Now I can have family over without being embarrassed." I believed her. Kyle was supposed to be part of that family. He's 32, built like someone who still thinks high school football might call him back. Broad shoulders, quick temper, and the restless energy of a man who believes the world owes him something. He bounced between jobs and always found his way back into Linda's life when money got tight. He never called me dad, only Tom. I didn't force it. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I helped where I could, taught him basic things, gave him my old drill when he moved out, covered bills when Linda asked me to keep the peace. I assumed kindness would eventually count for something. Then Kyle's biological father, Ray, started coming around again. Ray was loud and confident, the type who acted like he owned every room he walked into. Linda said he'd been mostly absent when Kyle was a kid. Lately, he was making up for lost time, which meant spoiling Kyle and reinforcing the idea that Ray was the only man who mattered. That Christmas, Ray insisted on coming to dinner. Linda said, "It's important to Kyle." I said, "So am I." She gave me that tight smile that meant she wanted no conflict and said, "Please, Tom, let's just have a nice night." By 5 o'clock, the house was warm from the oven, the smell of turkey heavy in the air. A store-bought pie sat on the counter because Linda's sister Diane baked by buying whatever was discounted. Someone put on old Christmas music, Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole, the kind my dad used to hum. I made coffee the way Linda liked it, strong and plain. Kyle arrived last, with Ray right behind him. Kyle slapped Ray on the shoulder and said, "There he is, the man of the hour." Ray looked at me like I worked there. "Smells good," he said. "We all pitch in," I replied. He chuckled as if that was amusing. We sat down. Plates clinked. Someone said a quick prayer. I reached for the carving knife, my dad's old one, thin and sharp, when Kyle suddenly grabbed the back of my father's chair. "Hold up," he said. I looked at him, confused. "What are you doing?" His eyes were bright and hard. He nodded toward Ray. "That seat belongs to my dad," he said clearly. "Get out." I laughed at first, like my mind hadn't caught up. "Kyle, don't." He shoved me. Not a joke, not a nudge. Both hands to my chest and shoulder. The chair scraped, my boot caught the rug, and I hit the floor hard. Pain shot through my hip and knocked the air out of me. Gravy splashed across my shirt and onto the wood. Someone gasped. A fork hit a plate with a sharp sound. A child whispered, "Mom?" Kyle stood over me, breathing hard, like he had finally proven something. Linda didn't look down. She grabbed napkins and wiped the spill, her face calm and distant, as if this was simply easier than choosing a side. I pushed myself up with one hand, the hardwood cold against my palm. The hit to my pride burned more than my hip. I looked at Linda, waiting for anything, a word, a reaction. She kept her eyes on the floor. In that quiet, blinking light moment, I understood what I had avoided for years. To them, I wasn't family. I was maintenance. I stood up slowly, steady despite the pain, and walked out into the Iowa cold without saying a word. My truck door closed with a hollow sound. I sat in the driveway, hands locked on the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. The porch light cast a weak yellow circle on the snow. Through the window, I could still see movement at the table, heads turning, someone laughing too loudly, as if laughter could erase what had just happened. My hip throbbed steadily. At 56, you don't bounce back. You feel every year at once. I started the engine and backed out without looking back. The tires crunched over frozen slush. I drove with the heater on full and the radio off. I didn't want a Christmas song pretending everything was fine. I ended up at Casey's for coffee because I didn't know where else to go. It smelled like grease and cinnamon rolls. I sat alone in a booth, staring at the dark window and watching my breath fog the glass. My phone rang. Linda. I let it ring. Then Kyle. Then Linda again. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because I wasn't sure what I'd say, and because I could already hear Linda's careful tone, trying to smooth it over like it was just another mess to clean up. I drove home, my home, at least legally, to the small ranch house I'd owned long before Linda. 2 bedrooms, a garage that still smelled faintly of sawdust, and a quiet that didn't pretend. On the way in, I noticed the thin folder on the hall shelf, my papers folder, deed copy, insurance, warranties, and a stack of receipts from the kitchen remodel at Linda's place. Weeks of Menards runs. New faucet, sink, cabinet hinges, backsplash tile I laid one by one after work, hands cramped and back aching. I remembered Linda standing in that finished kitchen, hand over her mouth saying, "Tom, I didn't know anyone would do this for me." I hadn't done it to be admired. I did it because I thought we were building something. Seeing those receipts that night felt like proof I'd paid my way into a family that still treated me like a guest. I changed out of the stained shirt and looked at the bruise in the bathroom mirror. Purple was already spreading across my hip, as wide as my hand. I sat in my recliner with an ice pack and stared at the blank TV. Then a memory surfaced. 2 years earlier, when Linda's faucet wouldn't stop leaking, Kyle had laughed and said, "That's why Mom needed a real man around." I had smiled then, thinking he meant me. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from Kyle. "You embarrassed my dad. You should have just moved. That chair isn't yours." Then another. "You're just a guest in this family, Tom. A guest who's overstayed." I read it twice. My grip tightened until my knuckles hurt. I didn't reply. Around midnight, I tried to sleep but couldn't find a position that didn't send pain through my hip. Every shift replayed the scene. Kyle's hands, Linda's eyes on the floor, the scrape of my father's chair like it was being pulled out of my life. I got up and made coffee, strong and plain, the way my dad drank it. I stood at the kitchen window and watched snow drift under the streetlight. I told myself it was just a chair, just a bad holiday moment, that people act strange and it would pass. But it wasn't the chair. It was the sentence Kyle said out loud, the one everyone had been quietly living by. "You don't belong." At 2:13 a.m., Linda finally texted, "Tom, please." He didn't mean it. "He's under a lot of stress. Can you come back so we can talk?" I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. He didn't mean it. Like a shove is something that happens by accident. Get out slips out easily when people are tired. Off the same way wiping gravy off the floor suddenly matters more than the man who hid it. I set my phone down and rubbed my forehead. Under the hurt and embarrassment, something else started to surface. An old line my father used to repeat came back to me. "Your name is your word, Tommy. Protect it." I had spent my entire adult life doing exactly that. I paid bills early. I kept my credit clean. I didn't co-sign for people who treated money like a joke. I didn't let anyone put their hands on me and call it care. Just after 6, my phone chimed with a sound I recognized but hadn't heard in years. A credit alert. My stomach sank before I even opened it. It came from the monitoring app I downloaded after a buddy at the VFW had his identity stolen. The subject line read, "Change detected." I tapped it, my thumb suddenly numb. My credit score had dropped. Not a small dip, but a hard fall, the kind that feels like your legs getting kicked out. New inquiry, new account activity. I leaned back in the recliner and felt colder than the snow outside. In my world, that only happened if something had been opened in my name, and the only people with my information were family. By 6:12 a.m., my phone was buzzing nonstop. Call after call stacked up. Linda, Kyle, Linda again. An unfamiliar local number. I didn't answer. I just watched the screen light up and felt a slow, sick certainty settle in. Whatever they'd done, it had finally reached me. My thumb hovered over the answer button, but I couldn't press it. Not yet. If I heard Kyle's voice right then, I'd either blow up or do what I'd always done. Give in. And I'd been giving in for years. The calls finally stopped, then started again. Linda, Kyle, unknown number, all unanswered. By 6:23, the call log looked endless. 23 missed calls. Kyle had called 12 times. Linda 9. The unknown number twice. I opened Kyle's voicemail first. His voice rushed out. Tom, call me back. It's some stupid banking thing. They're being ridiculous. Just call me. The next message came 2 minutes later, less confident. Listen, it's not what it looks like. I just need you to talk to someone. They said your name is on something. Just call me. The third voicemail made me exhale through my nose. Okay, seriously, what's going on? They froze my account. I can't even get gas. Just fix it. Then his voice slipped, the way people do when they're scared. Dad, he said, then corrected himself. Tom, please. For years, he couldn't bring himself to call me that. But the moment money got tight, the word came out on instinct. I listened to Linda's voicemail next. Her voice was shaky. Tom, please answer. Kyle's panicking. There's something going on with the credit union. Can you just pick up? Right after that, the unknown number called again. Same local area code. This time, I answered. Hello, Mr. Walker. A woman's voice, professional and careful. She introduced herself as Marcy from Hawkeye Community Credit Union and said she was calling about an urgent matter on my account. Did I have a moment to speak privately? I told her I was alone. She thanked me and explained there had been a delinquency notice issued on a personal loan where I was listed as the guarantor. I blinked. I'm listed as what? A guarantor, a co-signer. She said the loan was past due and had flagged my credit profile. She added that the other party had called earlier and claimed I always handled the bills and would approve whatever was needed to keep the loan current. The phrase burned. Always handled the bills, like I was a service agreement. I asked how much the loan was. She checked the file. $18,400. Opened 8 months ago. First payment missed last month. Second missed this week. That wasn't pocket money. That was a truck. That was months of someone else's poor choices. I asked if it affected my score, even though I already knew. She confirmed it did, because my name was tied to it. I told her I hadn't co-signed anything. There was a pause, like she'd expected that response. She said the loan file included my name and a signature attributed to me, and if I believed it wasn't mine, there were procedures. What procedures, I asked. She explained they could open a fraud review and that the fastest way was for me to come in. They officially opened at 8, but she could arrange to meet me sooner. I checked the time, 6:31. I said I'd be there. I didn't call Linda or Kyle. I pulled on jeans, a flannel, and my work boots like armor. The cold air slapped me awake as I stepped outside. Snow crunched under my soles. My hip complained, but I welcomed the pain. It kept me focused. The credit union parking lot was mostly empty, the sky dull and gray. I sat in my truck for a moment, studying my reflection in the windshield, gray at the temples, eyes worn. I thought about my father's chair, Kyle's hand gripping it like ownership. Then I went inside. Marcy met me in the lobby. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a badge clipped to her sweater. She led me to a small office that smelled of coffee and copier toner. She apologized for the timing and said she knew it was stressful. I told her to show me. She slid a folder across the desk. On top was the loan summary, Kyle's name, Linda's name, and mine typed neatly under guarantor. My stomach turned. She turned the monitor toward me and pulled up the signature page. My signature appeared at the bottom, except it wasn't mine. It looked similar at a glance, but the flow was wrong. The T looped in a way I never did. My last name ended with a flourish I'd never use. Marcy watched my face and asked if it was mine. I swallowed and said no. She nodded slowly and asked if I ever signed as Tommy. My throat tightened. Only my father had called me that. I hadn't signed that name since childhood. She pointed to the line. In uneven cursive, it read, Tommy Walker. My skin went cold. She asked who had access to my information. I stared at the screen and said, my wife. Marcy didn't react. She simply placed a form on the desk and explained it was a statement of fraud. If I signed it, an investigation would begin, with serious consequences for whoever submitted the paperwork. My phone buzzed again. Kyle. She said I didn't have to decide immediately. I looked at the pen, then at the forged signature. I told her I wasn't deciding out of anger, but because my name meant something. I signed the fraud statement with a steady hand and a heavy stomach. Outside that small office, the credit union remained quiet and routine while my family situation started to collapse. I realized then that the shove hadn't been the worst part. The shove was just the warning. The paperwork was the follow-through. Marcy filed the form, explained the next steps, and said an investigator would contact me for signature samples. It was all procedure, calm and factual, which somehow made it worse. Back in my truck, my phone lit up again. Linda. I answered before I could reconsider. She asked where I was, said Kyle couldn't access his account and Ray was furious. She asked what I'd done. I asked why my name was on an $18,000 loan. The silence on the line said enough. Then she said she was trying to help, that Kyle needed it, that Ray promised to cover it, that it was temporary. And I said quietly and clearly, and you signed my name. You would have said no, she told me, as if that explained everything. That's because no is a complete sentence, I replied, and my name isn't a shared resource. She begged anyway. Tom, please, it's just paperwork. Just paperwork, like vows are just words, like a signature is just ink. I drove straight to Linda's house as snow fell steadily, quiet and persistent. When I walked in, Kyle was waiting near the door like a guard, eyes red and unsteady. Are you happy now? He snapped. They froze everything. I can't even buy gas. Ray stood behind him in the living room, pacing with his coat still on. In the corner pushed aside like it didn't matter was my father's chair. Moved. Kyle noticed me looking and smirked. Yeah, we moved your little throne. It's my dad's chair, I said. Kyle laughed sharply. Your dad's dead. Mine's right here. Ray pointed at me and barked, you don't do this to family. I looked at him. Kyle didn't care about family when he shoved me to the floor last night. Kyle stepped closer, voice rising. You're a guest here, Tom. A guest who overstayed. That seat was never yours. Linda stood in the kitchen doorway, twisting a dish towel, refusing to meet my eyes. That hurt more than anything else. Tell him, I said to her. Tell him whose name is on that loan. She opened her mouth, closed it. Kyle's confidence cracked, panic showing through. Mom, he said. She finally whispered, I signed it. I thought it would be okay. Kyle stared at her, then at me, like the ground had dropped away. You told them it was fraud, he said. You made my mom a criminal. I told them the truth, I said. I didn't sign anything. You could have covered it, Kyle shouted. You always cover it. That line hit harder than the shove because it was true. I had. I turned and walked out before my temper did something I couldn't undo. In the truck, my hip throbbed with every bump. For a moment, I wanted to dull everything, call it a mistake, make a payment, swallow the embarrassment like I had for years. Then my phone buzzed with a new voicemail from Kyle. This one wasn't angry, it was desperate. Tom, listen, he said, breathless. Just tell them you signed it. I swear I'll pay you back. Ray says he's got it, he just needs time. Don't do this, it's embarrassing. Embarrassing. Not wrong, not illegal, just embarrassing. I didn't go home. I went to the VFW. Post 788 isn't pretty, but it's honest. Stale coffee and men who don't waste words. Frank Delaney, a 72-year-old retired attorney, read fine print so the rest of us didn't get taken. I slid the folder to him. He skimmed it, tapped the signature page. Tommy, that's not you. No, I said. That's my father's voice on paper. Frank leaned back. This isn't family stress. It's identity misuse. If you let it go, it won't stop. Next time it's a mortgage, a credit card, your retirement. I muttered that I wasn't trying to destroy my life. He nodded. You didn't. They did. You're just done protecting them from consequences. I stopped by my house long enough to grab a notebook and the shoebox with spare documents. Old statements, IDs, the boring things you don't think you'll need. I wrote everything down. Christmas Eve, the shove, the calls, the loan. I even checked my doorbell camera, not for drama, just because Frank's voice stayed in my head. Document everything. By noon, messages were already spreading. Relatives, friends, someone from church. You're really doing this to Linda? You're ruining Christmas. Kyle's just a kid. I didn't reply. I saved everything. Then Marcy called. The review was now formal. An investigator would contact me that day. She also said Mr. Parker had called demanding it be fixed. She wanted me to hear that from her. 10 minutes later, another number rang. Mr. Walker, this is Investigator Harlan. I'm assigned to your case. I'd like to meet today. I looked at the gray Iowa sky and felt my resolve set. Kyle wanted me out of a chair. Now he'd learned what happens when you try to sit in a man's name. The meeting with Investigator Harlan took place in a plain credit union conference room. Beige walls, cold coffee, stacks of forms. He was in his mid-50s, calm, precise, the kind of man who didn't need volume. He placed a recorder on the table. I'll ask questions about the loan and your signature. You can stop at any time. I'm not here to stop, I said. He asked me to walk through Christmas Eve, the chair, the shove, the calls. I kept it factual, times, names, words used. Then he slid 3 sheets of paper toward me. Sign your name 10 times. Normal signature. My pen moved the way it always had. Tom Walker. Steady, practiced. He compared it to the Tommy signature from the loan. He didn't pretend it was close. That's not a match. No, I said. It isn't. He asked who had access to my information. I answered honestly. My wife did. We were married. That's what trust looks like until it doesn't. When we finished, he closed the folder. We'll forward our findings to the county attorney. That doesn't guarantee charges, but it can. Be prepared. I stepped back into the cold and my phone lit up. Linda, then Kyle, then Ray. I didn't answer. I drove back to the VFW. Frank was there, reading the paper like order still existed. I showed him the case number. Kyle swung between anger and begging. Ray tried threats. Frank snorted. Threats don't fix fraud. I said quietly that I didn't want Linda destroyed. Frank looked at me over his glasses. Wanting consequences isn't wanting destruction. Once you tell the truth, you don't control the system. That's the cost. The next week felt like Cedar Rapids shrank. Smiles at church were forced. I heard my name in whispers. Linda's sister said I was punishing her. I kept my head down and saved every message. On January 9th, a letter arrived with the county seal, date, time, courtroom number at the Lynn County Courthouse. Hearing regarding a fraudulent signature and financial responsibility. I called Frank. It's happening. I'll be there, he said. Wear something decent. Let 'em see who you are. The courthouse looked the same as always. Old limestone, flag-snapping mat steps worn smooth by years of truth and fear. Inside smelled like metal detectors and paper. Linda sat on a bench, eyes swollen. Kyle paced in a suit that didn't fit his attitude. Ray stood beside him, arms crossed, smug. Kyle saw me and stepped forward, stopped by a deputy's look. You really doing this? He hissed. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm answering for my name. Linda reached for my sleeve, her hand shaking. Tom, please, I'll make payments. I'll sell things. Just say it was a misunderstanding. I looked at her and felt the old urge to fix it rise, then remembered her eyes on the floor while I lay in gravy. I'm not doing this to Kyle, I said quietly. I'm doing this for the man I used to be, the one who worked 40 years for a name that meant something. She shook her head like she couldn't accept a real boundary. The bailiff called our case. We entered the courtroom, wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the judge's bench high above us. The judge reviewed the file. Mr. Walker, you are contesting a guarantor signature on a personal loan, claiming your identity was used without consent. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Kyle's attorney stood and called it a family misunderstanding, said Mrs. Walker believed she had permission. The judge raised a hand. Belief is not consent. Do you have proof? The attorney hesitated. No written proof. The judge turned to Kyle. Did Mr. Walker agree to co-sign? Kyle glanced at Ray. That's not my question, the judge said. Did he agree? Kyle swallowed. Not directly. Marcy testified about the dates, the Tommy signature, the missed payments. Investigator Harlan confirmed the signature analysis. Frank sat behind me, steady as stone. Kyle's attorney tried one last angle. Mr. Walker, isn't this really about a Christmas argument? I felt the room focus in. There was an argument, I said. There was also a shove. But I'm here because my name was used to take out a loan I never agreed to. The judge nodded once. Do you have additional evidence regarding intent? I do, I said. Kyle didn't think I'd find out. I handed a flash drive to the bailiff, audio from my doorbell camera outside Mrs. Walker's home on Christmas Eve. Kyle's head snapped up. What? He blurted too loud. Proceed, the judge said. The speaker crackled. Wind, a door closing. Then Kyle's voice, laughing like it was nothing. The old man's too weak to do anything. Ray followed, smug. He'll pay it like he always does. Then Kyle again, light and cruel. He's just maintenance. The courtroom went still in the way only real silence happens. No coughing, no movement. Even a man shifting behind us stopped, like noise itself felt wrong. Linda covered her mouth. Kyle's color drained. For a brief second, I saw fear before arrogance rushed back in. The judge closed the file. That's sufficient, she said. She looked at Kyle. Those statements show you expected Mr. Walker to absorb a debt he did not consent to. That establishes intent. Kyle's lawyer started to speak. The judge raised her hand. No. She turned to Linda, firm but measured. Mrs. Walker, you placed your spouse at financial risk. This matter will be referred accordingly. There will be consequences. As the bailiff guided us out, I found myself rubbing my thumb over my wedding band, the way you worry a smooth stone. I thought of my father's chair, how it used to creak when he leaned back, watching snow fall through the window, steady in his place. Kyle tried to take my place with a shove. The court handed it back with a sentence. Outside, the cold air hit my lungs sharp and clean. My hips still hurt, my chest still ached. But I stood straighter than I had in years. Kyle wanted me out of a chair. Instead, he pushed me into a room where the truth had a microphone. The next week, Cedar Rapids returned to being Cedar Rapids. Snow piled gray along curbs. People hurried into Hy-Vee with shoulders hunched, radios murmuring weather like it mattered more than anyone's pain. That's how public moments work. They feel enormous, then the world goes back to buying milk. But my world didn't. Linda moved through days like a ghost. She stayed with her sister for a while. When she came back, she barely spoke, just moved room to room as if counting what she'd risked. The house looked the same, but the air didn't. Once trust cracks, even silence sounds different. Kyle didn't call for 3 days. On the 4th at 7:18 p.m., a text came through. You didn't have to play that audio. You made me look like a monster. My thumb hovered. I wanted to say, you did that yourself. Instead, I wrote, you made yourself sound the way you sounded. A minute later, Ray says you're dead to us. I read it twice and set the phone down. My hand wasn't shaking. That surprised me. I didn't feel victory. I felt something closer to grief that had finally stopped arguing with reality. 2 nights later, Linda showed up at my door with red eyes and a grocery bag held like an offering. She stood on the porch hunched, bracing for rejection. Tom, she said quietly, can I come in? I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the couch, bag in her lap. Inside were my favorite crackers and a box of peppermint tea I'd mentioned once. Small details, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. I messed up, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I waited until the silence made room for honesty. She continued, voice thin. Kyle was crying. Ray was yelling. She panicked. She thought if she handled it herself, no one would get hurt. You handled it, I said, and I got hurt. Tears slid down her face. I didn't want you to leave, she said. I didn't want to lose my son. I nodded slowly. So you chose the option where you could lose me quietly. She flinched. I'm sorry, she said. I know sorry doesn't fix it. No, I said, it doesn't. She twisted the bag until it crinkled. She offered counseling, payments, selling jewelry. I stopped her. Linda, this isn't about money. She looked confused. It's about me being on the floor and you acting like the spill mattered more than my body. It's about Kyle learning he can shove me and you'll smooth it over. It's about my name. She swallowed hard. I didn't know what to do. You could have looked at me, I said. You could have said my name. Her shoulders shook. Then she said the quiet truth. I didn't want Ray to win, so I let him. That was the root of it. Linda avoided conflict. Kyle learned to use it. The county attorney didn't jail Linda. She cooperated. She signed statements. She agreed to restitution. There were real consequences, mandatory financial counseling, no access to my credit, a formal separation agreement drafted to protect me. That paperwork felt like a lid closing on the marriage I thought I had. Kyle lost more than he expected. He sold his truck to cover part of what he owed. His account stayed restricted. The warehouse supervisor job he bragged about went to someone else after the background check flagged the mess. He blamed me for all of it, but he couldn't escape the truth. None of it would have happened if he hadn't treated my name like a napkin, something you use and toss. Weeks passed. Snow melted into dirty patches. February wind found every crack in my windows. I was living alone in my small ranch house again, like before Linda. Only now the silence wasn't lonely. It was honest. One Saturday, I stood in the garage and looked at the empty space where the chair once sat while I refinished it. I could almost smell the wood stain. I thought about taking it back out of spite. I didn't. Spite would have turned it into a trophy in a war I didn't want. Instead, I asked Frank to come with me, not to fight, just to retrieve what was mine. We met Linda at her place. Kyle wasn't there. Ray wasn't there. The chair sat in the corner like it was being punished for existing. I ran my hand along the worn armrest, smooth and familiar. Linda stood behind me, hands wringing. "You can take it," she said. "Of course." I nodded. "I'm taking it home, where it belongs." Frank helped load it into my truck. As I tied it down, the chair creaked once, like clearing its throat.